Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and in today's video we are going to look at the dungeon journal for the last 4 bosses in the dungeon journal for Amirdrassil, the Dream's Hope, the new raid coming out in patch 10.2. If you missed the first video where we looked at the first 5, there'll be a link in the top right where you can go and watch that now. Yeah, these are the last 4 bosses in the dungeon journal, which are, I think Nymue and Smolderon are wing end bosses, along with maybe Laradar. And then Tindral is the second to last boss, and Fyrakk, of course, is the last boss. Let's get started with Nymue. So Nymue was placed in this verdant realm by Eonar when she and Freya shaped the dream. In the Wellspring Temple, they enforce and protect the ordering of the Emerald Dream, weaving its wilderness into complex patterns. Basically, there's a wing of the raid that is like the living side, where there's the Council of Dreams and Nymue and stuff. Okay, so Continuum. At 100% energy, Nymue draws in life energy and fires beams onto several locations in the room that travel along, weaving magic into the floor. Nymue pulses with immense power that inflicts 100k nature damage every second for 10 seconds. When complete, the Verdant Matrix is revealed. The Verdant Matrix says when crossed over, the Verdurous. Adjective. Rich in verdure. Freshly green, verdant, covered with verdure as places. All right, what is verdure? Lush green vegetation. All right, there's also, a sports massage place called Verdure Sports Massage. That's cool. All right, well, learn a new word today. So basically, at 100% energy, she's going to make lines on the floor that if you walk over them, you're going to get vegetabled to the tune of 250,000 nature damage. That's a lot. But I guess not lethal, but if you run over a bunch of those in a row, you're going to die. So we'll see what the restrictions are on how movement works in the fight if you have to cross over those or something. Threads of Life says Nymue coalesces 3 verdant cruels. Goodness gracious, what is a cruel? Cruel. A cruel is a thin, loosely twisted, worsted yarn used for tapestry and embroidery. What is worsted? Worsted means a fine, smooth yarn spun from combed, long staple wool. All right, whew. Wowee, this is a wordy, new word day for sure. Okay, so she coalesces 3 of those that rush towards random players. The Cruels inflict 250k nature damage and knock away all players in the path. Oh, interesting. And if you get knocked away, maybe you're going to cross over the Verdant Matrix and you're going to take extra damage. Safeguard Weave focuses a Dream Binder on a random location in the Verdant Matrix, weaving a Cycle Warden into existence. The Cycle Warden surrounds Nymue with the Shroud of Nature, reducing damage taken by 99%. Additionally, the Cycle Warden bursts with new life, inflicting damage to all players within 40 yards every 4 seconds and causing violent flora to spread, which do a 5-yard AoE swirly. So presumably you're going to need to kill the Cycle Wardens so that you can keep killing the boss and stop the damage on you. Threaded Blast blasts the tank for 1.6 mil physical, 800k nature. Weaver's Burden reduces movement speed, deals nature damage over time, increasing every 2 seconds. Upon expiration, this strikes all players, doing nature damage. The damage is reduced the further away players are from the blast. So the tank is going to get Weaver's Burden, and then the other tank's going to taunt, and then the tank with Weaver's Burden is going to be running away, but they're getting slowly slowed down and taking more and more nature damage, and then they explode and bonk the whole raid for not too much damage, right? 300k, even if they're stacked on top of everybody, that's like half a health bar, but still, you're going to want to get that away to do less. And then finally, Viridian Rain says rain falls from above, inflicting nature damage to all players every 1.5 seconds for 6 seconds. Wow, this is not a big dungeon journal, so presumably a lot is going to come down to how the ground is laid out, what the ground looks like here, and just how mechanically intensive it is to play around this Verdant Matrix. But if it ends up looking like, a big maze with a huge pattern of lines that you have to avoid crossing over, this could be a really interesting fight. Smolderon is the new Fire Lord. This is the new Ragnaros here, which doesn't have a model yet, so unlucky. That unleashes the power of the Firelands to expand his domain and incinerate the Emerald Dream. Stage 1, the Fire Lord's Fury. So this is a mythic mechanic here. Smolderon decimates his primary target, 1.2 million physical, and afflicts them with Searing Aftermath. An additional 2.4 million fire is split evenly among all players within 9 yards of the primary target. All players hit by the effect are branded and afflicted with Cauterizing Wound. Cauterizing Wound says 1 million healing absorbed. Removing the absorbed creates a cauterized explosion at the player's location a few moments later. In Mythic difficulty, targets afflicted with Cauterizing Wound that are hit by flame waves create additional flame waves, and Cauterized Explosion is a swirly that needs to be dodged. Okay, so my inclination upon reading this is that you're going to want to try and have your tank solo soak this, but 2.4 million fire is like 4 or 5 times scarier than 1.2 million fizz. That's like diffuse plus Zen Med to live that kind of thing, or immune it, right? But man, each person that splits this fire damage, like as you start adding more people to try and make this fire damage not kill your tank, if you only add a few people, they're going to need big defensives or immunities of their own. And if you add a bunch of people, all players hit are getting a 1 million healing absorb. This seems like there's a really heavy incentive to just try and find a way to have one person get hit by this. And, something like a Prop Paladin Bubble Taunt against it, Spell Warding will be really big for this if that works. Searing Aftermath is, let's see, that also, so this is what the primary target gets. Searing Aftermath is a explosion that does fire damage to the raid, further away taking reduced damage. So again, this is another thing where it's like, man, if your tank can solo the whole slam, they can get really far away. But if you have to soak in with this, then it's going to be harder for those players that soaked with them to get far away from the aftermath. And then finally, players that got hit take 500% increased damage the next time. So both a tank swap and if there's a group soak component, which I think we're going to try our best to have there not be, but if there needs to be, then that also is going to involve swapping players, which it already would have because they're going to be using big defensives if they're in there. Because I don't think you're going to try and do this with half the raid each time. Good lord, 1 million healing absorbed. We're going to try our best to not do that way. Seeking Inferno says, Smolderon creates Seeking Infernos that fixate on a nearby player. Whenever any player collides, 200k is inflicted to all players, and all players take 500% increased damage from Seeking Inferno for 4 seconds. Okay, so Infernos will chase people, and the goal is going to be to soak them in a staggered fashion so that you don't hit the raid twice, because if you hit the raid twice, the second one is going to deal 1 million damage to everybody, and that's going to wipe the raid. Presumably, if he keeps creating these, though, maybe at some point at the end of the fight, you just say, okay, just dodge them for the rest of the fight, and we're going to try and get over the finish line here. But once you make that call, you are on the clock to end this fight. Overheated, or I guess to end the phase, maybe. Overheated says Smolderon ignites the player, causing them to do fire damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds to players within 5 yards. When they expire, they shoot out flame waves, which again, we know that people who are cauterized will create additional flame waves if they get hit, so don't get hit. Lava Geysers says Smolderon Smolderon slams the ground, causing plumes of lava to erupt at random locations, inflicting fire damage and knocking back any player standing within. When the lava settles, a pool of smoldering ground is left behind, which is fire damage over time. And then finally, there is a dot blistering heat on the whole raid for the whole fight, 20k DPS on the dot on the raid. World in Flames, don't know what causes the push here, but here, Smolderon sets his soul ablaze, increasing the frequency blistering heat occurs from every 3 seconds to 1 second, and damage by 80%. Okay, so, wow. This moves it from a 20k DPS thing to a 100k DPS thing, which is quintuple damage from blistering heat for the rest of the fight. Heating Up says, he stacks up a 10% damage done increase in this phase as well. Once he's heated up 4 times, he can cast World in Destruction, which I assume is this World in Flames thing, but maybe it's just an untargeted ability or an unlisted ability that wipes the raid. Devour Essence slams Ember Scar into the ground to feast on branded players' essence, causing a shockwave that knocks players back and shatters living flames from branded players that make their way towards Smolderon. Only players afflicted by Brand of Damnation create living flames. Okay. What brands people with branded damnation? I'm not sure. But either way, the living flames are... Okay, so you need to soak these, because if you don't, his damage gets increased by 5%, but if you do soak it, you take damage and get Ignited Essence, which also does increase your damage and healing done. And the effect stacks, but does not extend the duration. So you're going to want to collect like 3 of these at once. You're not going to want to collect them towards the end of your existing one, because this isn't even the overlapping tech. This is like the Mongoose Bite style of window, where if you acquire stacks at the end of it, you're going to actually be pretty sad with how it works out. You're going to want to try and get 3 or 4 stacks of Ignited Essence and then blast for a while, rather than getting one and then getting another 10 seconds later, because you're just losing value. World in Flames says Smolderon channels his blazing soul into Ember Scar, periodically causing bursts of fire to engulf portions of the arena. This does 665k fire damage and applies lingering burn to all players caught within the blast, which deals 124k fire every second for 10 seconds, and you're already taking 100k every second from blistering heat. So that's just going to be a dodge. So this looks like a very mechanically less intense part of the fight. That's just a burn the boss, get the living flames soaked by your biggest damage dealers, and blast the boss before you die. Love it. This looks like a fight that is going to be fun. This is my early prediction for, I mean, this is like the Sludge Fisty type fight of the tier. It looks like the kind of single target burn looking thing for the most part, and yeah, I suspect that this will be the fight I enjoy the most this tier, aside from if Fyrakk is like an all-time great. All right, the second to last boss is Tindral Sageswift, which is the dragon riding boss, I believe. So we're going to see what the dungeon journal looks like for this one. 5 phases, 2 intermissions, stage 1, Moonkin of the Flame. This is going to be fun. I'm going to look forward to doing a lot of damage during this phase. Tindral Sageswift has a tank mechanic, Searing Wrath, that is a stacking fire dot. Wild Mushrooms, which is a mythic mechanic, that creates blazing and poisonous mushrooms around himself every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. The poisonous mushrooms are only on mythic, it looks like, whereas the blazings are maybe on lower difficulties as well. The poisonous ones erupt after 2 seconds, doing damage to enemies within the area, and increasing their damage taken from poisonous mushrooms by 500% for 3 seconds. If it fails to hit a player, it deals damage to all players. It deals 160k DPS for 10 seconds. That's probably too much to let that happen. Blazing mushrooms, on the other hand, do the same thing, except without... Oh no, it doesn't do the same thing. This one, it's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, it's fire and physical instead of physical and nature, but the same numbers on the tank hit. And you can't take another blazing mushroom or poisonous mushroom for 3 seconds. And if it fails to hit a player, it just does 600k up front and probably wipes the raid. So basically, the boss is going to create mushrooms around him, and your tanks are going to have to make sure, like if it goes poisonous, blazing, blazing, you're going to have to make sure that you're alternating and not having 2 poisonous soaked by the same tank in a row. So that's going to be a fun one to do. Actually, that sounds like a fun tank mechanic. Fiery Growth is a mythic healer dispellable effect that causes a player to take 125k fire damage per second. It is removed, but then fire erupts when you dispel them, which afflicts the player with Lingering Cinder and leaves behind Scorching Ground. On mythic difficulty, afflicts all players with Lingering Cinder when Fiery Growth is removed. Okay, so this afflicts just one player when it's dispelled on lower difficulties, but on mythic it hits everybody, and it does 70k fire damage per second to those players. That's a lot for 3 seconds. Okay, so it's not too bad, but maybe it stacks. And it makes a scorched ground area. Okay, so you're going to want to run out, get dispelled, and if multiple of these happen at the same time, you're going to need to stagger it so that you don't have, 2 stacks of Lingering Cinder if this can stack. All right, Falling Stars is a fire damage within 15 yards of impact that also leaves behind Star Fragments, which is a 4-yard AoE that does more damage, it looks like. And then finally, there's Mass Entanglement, which targets players with fiery vines, erupting after 6 seconds, doing fire damage to players in the area, rooting the target, doing damage every 1 second until they're destroyed. So it's targeting a player, and it looks like that player is always going to get hit, but everybody else needs to get out, and then vines will get those people, and then you'll kill the vines. So you're probably going to want to try and stack these, and either when you stack them, maybe you take extra damage, but then you can AoE them down, and maybe those players live with a defensive when they stack. Or you're going to maybe do something like Jailer Torments in P3, where you don't exactly stack all of them, but you kind of do a bunch of stacks of 2, so that, again, you can kill the ads more efficiently. There's Moonkins of the Flame here that have Incarn, which trigger Sunfire. Okay, so this is Tindral shapeshift into a Moonkin, triggering Sunfire every 3 seconds, which targets players with it. That's nature damage over time. And then Fire Beam, which deals 1,000,000 fire damage to players within 15 yards of the impact, creates multiple fire beams that each deal 600k to players within the area. On Heroic and above, he creates additional solar beams after impact. Okay, so you're going to want to dodge that. Owl of the Flame. So this again, okay, so these are two different, these aren't ads. These are the forms that he swaps between in this phase. Owl of the Flame says, empowered feather falls from Tindral's owl form, enabling players to jump on their dragon riding mounts. There it is. And Flaring Wings says Tindral bombards the platform with Fire Bomb. Flare bombs fall from the sky, inflicting fire damage to players when it reaches the platform. Flying through a flare bomb on a dragon riding mount absorbs the flare, inflicting fire damage and increasing damage taken from flare bombs by 1,000% for 1 minute. Also grants the player Rolling Flame, which lets them do fire AoE when they land. So you're gonna soak a feather, jump on your dragon riding mount, soak a flare bomb, and then dive bomb and land on top of Tindral. Okay, honestly, I'm okay with this application of dragon riding so far. Hopefully, it's a nice big hitbox that isn't too. If there are moments where you feel like I should have soaked that, you know, my character went through it, but it was being buggy, they need to make the AoE of soaking the flare bombs on the dragon riding mounts big enough that that almost never happens, because that is the kind of thing I'd be very concerned about. Intermission here says, so Burning Pursuit, again, maybe this is all of us on our dragon riding mounts here as we chase after Tindral. Flying through the essence of the Emerald Dream empowers players, increasing damage done by 5% on all players. The consumed essence leave behind Emerald Winds, which lets you, get vigor and extra flying speed. So I guess all of us are going to get one of these feathers by the end of this fight, or maybe the end of the phase, or maybe we'll just, at the start of the intermission, get on our dragon riding mount somehow. And fly through these dream essences, chase after Tindral, who has a flaming owl. Yeah, drops the feathers still. Does Typhoon that does damage to players in an area. And also leaves scorching feathers in the air that will hit us and remove vigor if we hit them. So we're going to soak the Emerald Winds and dodge the scorching feathers while we chase after him. And then you need to catch up to him and break a shield before he casts Supernova. All right, makes sense. Stage 2, Tree of the Flame. So again, we have the same mechanics of P1 outside of form, and the same Owl of the Flame mechanics. But then we also have Tree of Flame instead of Moonkin form here, which triggers Suppressive Ember every 6 seconds, which surrounds the target area with Suppressive Ember, absorbing healing. So presumably you're going to want to have somebody stand in that area to get healed to break the Suppressive Ember. Tindral unleashes Seed of Flame around himself and sets the platform ablaze, inflicting fire damage to all players every 1 second for 10 seconds. The seed gets destroyed when a player steps on it, inflicting fire damage and increasing damage taken from Safeguard by 50% for 6 seconds. The effect stacks. The seed grows into a flaming tree if not destroyed. In Heroic difficulty and above, stepping on it takes damage, and the tree does fire damage to all players every 2 seconds, so you're going to want to stomp on those. Okay. Intermission again, another dragon flying intermission phase. And then finally we have Seer of the Flame, which it looks like it is just the phase 1 and 2 mechanics both existing at the same time. So the boss here will be, I guess, shapeshifting between human, moonkin, tree, and owl instead of just 3 of those 4. All right. This is going to be heavily implementation dependent, but if the dragon riding stuff isn't too fiddly and too much of what you need to min-max on this fight, I'm still worried about this fight and the dragon riding nature of it, but I'm reasonably optimistic so far. I like the Wild Mushrooms tank mechanic. And yeah, I think it's, I like the way that it's kind of weaving in these different forms. It's kind of a callback to Major Domo Stag Helm or whatever in Firelands, where it had the different or the different forms that you could force by doing different things. Maybe these forms. So there's nothing in the Dungeon Journal about like pain stacking up in one of these forms that would indicate you can cause them to shift by doing something. But maybe that's how it works, and that's just not in the Dungeon Journal yet. But yeah, either way, it looks like an interesting fight. We'll see how it looks. Again, obviously, dragon riding fight. Big worry there of a gimmick fight this late in the raid. And then our final fight is Fyrakk the Blazing. Engorged with the power of Shadow Flame and wielding the legendary axe Fyrakk, Dreamrender, Fyrakk now prepares to feast on the energies of Amirdrassil itself, remaking the world in flame. So this is a 3-phase, 1 intermission fight. Stage 1 says Fyrakk wields the burning blade, Fyrakk the Dreamrender. There is a picture of him in visage form, but right now we just see the dragon form here. Maybe it shifts around in this fight. Roots of Amirdrassil says, and these were roots that were visible actually in the picture of this fight. The roots of Amirdrassil nurture the world tree with the energy of the Emerald Dream. If raging flames reach it, then we lose. Okay, so this is like if the Heart of Azeroth dies on the Jailer fight, we lose. You got to make sure the roots do not get burned. Shadows of Fyrakk. Malevolent shadow energy emerges from the flames and leaps towards a target after 6 seconds, inflicting physical damage and applying Fyrakk's mark. The shadow erupts upon impact, doing 3 million damage split evenly among players within 6 yards of the target. So whoever gets targeted by this is going to need to soak, or to get soaked. All right, up next is Firestorm. Fyrakk calls burning meteors down upon players, inflicting shadow flame damage to players within 9 yards and creating raging flames upon impact. Shards of each meteor also impact the tree, which deals damage to players within 3 yards of the impact locations. All right. Raging flames are damage over time you don't want to stand in, and wildfire causes Fyrakk to... So Fyrakk bites Fyrakk into the bark of the tree, doing damage to all players. Raging flames spread to nearby locations and inflict damage to players within 9 yards. If they spread to the roots, then it's game over. Okay, so again, fire management and soaking, or not having this on the roots is going to be important. Dreamrend. Fyrakk rends the fabric of the Emerald Dream, doing fire damage to all players and opening up a rift into the Firelands. Searing heat pours through the rift, inflicting fire damage to all players every second for 10 seconds and pulling them towards the location. Farther away from the rift, receive less damage. If you're drawn beneath the rift, you are incinerated. Escaping flames also deal shadow flame damage to players caught in their wake, so this is probably dodgeable dark embers that come out of the rift. The burning rift inflicts 1.6 million damage every 1 second to players within it. That's what being incinerated means. Blaze is a heroic mechanic that says players get wreathed in flames that explode outwards after 4 seconds, inflicting 500k shadow flame to any player caught in the effect. Burning presence is just heat damage over time fire damage over time, shadow flame damage over time, that is 40k DPS on the raid, and occasionally sets targets aflame. Players that are aflame are dispellable, but this debuff does grow in damage over time. It's a dot that occasionally happens. Fyrakk's Bite is the tank mechanic, deals 1.6 million physical, 800k shadow flame, and brands the target with Fyrakk's mark, which one of the other abilities reference this as well, which inflicts shadow flame damage to those who wear the mark. Okay, so the other ability that inflicts Fyrakk's mark, basically every time the boss autos, the tank that got Fyrakk's mark from Fyrakk's Bite and the other player that got it from the other mechanic that does it are going to take 300k shadow flame damage. And the effect stacks? Okay, so I guess you can get multiple stacks of the mark and then take double damage from each auto. There's also a fireball you're going to want to dodge. And then finally, Predator that says Fyrakk leaps at his current target if not within reach, doing a melee attack with Fyrakk. Okay, so yeah, you're going to want to not trigger this too often, because each time you do, it's not just going to do damage to you, but it's also going to do damage to your co-tank probably, because they have a mark, and then some random person or people in your raid that have Fyrakk's mark from Shadows of Fyrakk, right? This applies a Fyrakk's mark. All right, interesting P1. I guess then there's an intermission that says Fyrakk assaults the heart of Amirdrassil directly with corrupting flames. He begins to corrupt the heart of the tree with shadow flame breath, converting its life force into a barrier of energy that absorbs damage equal to 6.4% of his maximum health. He pulses with Shadow Flame while the shield holds, doing damage and increasing in intensity over time. After 30 seconds, the tree is fully corrupted, and Amirdrassil burns, and you lose. He's also doing a breath that you don't want to stand in that is hitting the tree. Fyrakk leaps into the sky above Amirdrassil and descends in dragon form, inflicting physical damage to all players upon impact and knocking them upwards. Wow, so he's maybe going to break the top of the tree or something if that's where you're fighting him when this happens, or maybe just this is just what happens after you break the shield or before you break the shield. I don't know. There will also be flame orbs that get drawn in, and you need to soak them, which when you soak them, they do 166k players to all 166k Shadow Flame to all players, and you'll take extra damage if you soak multiple, it looks like. Burning Heart causes him to deal damage to all players, and Devouring Orbs makes him pulse for more damage until canceled. Okay, so yeah, the orbs got to not reach Fyrakk. You got to soak them with different people soaking each one, and maybe in a somewhat staggered fashion. Maybe Singe is a raid-wide thing, actually. Maybe it's not soak with different people. Maybe it's just stagger it. Burning Scales is a healing mechanic that just says 30k Shadow Flame DPS to the raid in this intermission. So yeah, you're just going to want to break him out of his shield before he corrupts the tree. If he corrupts the tree, you lose. Children of the Stars says a power stirs within the heart of Amirdrassil as Fyrakk manifests living Shadow Flame to aid him. Once again, if the world tree... Okay, so now the world tree has a health bar, and if it reaches 0, you lose. Spirits of the Kaldorei periodically emerge from the tree in its darkest hour. If they reach the heart of Amirdrassil, they transfer their remaining health to the world tree. And there is a spirit and a Darnassian Ancient, which is an ancient tree spirit extinguished in the burning of Darnassus. Okay. Presumably these will be healable, and you'll need to heal them so that when they reach the heart of Amirdrassil, they'll heal the heart, which is probably taking damage over time. And the Darnassian Ancient's only on Mythic. Maybe it's got a bigger health pool. Greater Firestorm deals Shadow Flame to all players within 9 yards, creates a Burning Colossus upon impact, and there's also smaller shards as well. The Burning Colossus deals big tank damage to their current target, and does AoE damage to players within 15 yards, so maybe you're ranged to kill these off. Meteor says Fyrakk plummets from the sky, dealing 1,000,000 Shadow Flame damage to all players upon landing, but the further away you are, the less damage you take. So he's going to be dropping down on you, and you're going to run away from wherever he's landing. Shadow Flame Devastation causes him to do 4 million damage in a line across Amirdrassil's surface, an additional 4 million damage every 5.2 seconds for 20 seconds to players standing within the area. So don't stand in that fire. You're going to want to dodge that. And then it also creates Flame Spawn, which do damage to all players and stack up in intensity over time, so you want to kill these quickly. They can also instantly destroy nearby spirits of Teldrassil, so I guess you're going to want to maybe grip them away from those or something. Burning Scales, also, again, this is just radiating damage to the whole raid. Blaze, that wreath mechanic that targets players and they'll have to go and spread away. Burning Presence is, again, all players getting damage over time. So we've got 2 different things that slowly radiate damage over time. The Intermission 1 mechanic and the Phase 1 mechanic. So more total damage. You're still getting the Aflame debuffs. And then there's still Fyrallath's Bite and Predator. Although notably, none of the other mechanics in this phase seem to apply Fyrallath's Mark. So that'll just be a tank mechanic in this phase. Then finally, Stage 3. Fyrakk unleashes the full power of an incarnate in Amirdrassil's final hour. Seed of Amirdrassil says, as Amirdrassil begins to bloom, seeds form on its surface which can be carried by players. Periodically, the seeds surge with power, allowing any player carrying a seed to begin a bloom. If a seed is hit by Eternal Firestorm, Shadow Flame Breath, or Blaze, a corrupted seed is created. Bloom creates a big shield, a 1 million shield, absorb shield, for players within 9 yards, so you're going to want to use that. But if the seed becomes corrupted, it instead does a bunch of damage to all players, so don't get them hit by any of these things. Eternal Firestorm says Fyrakk calls burning meteors down upon Amirdrassil, which you're going to want to dodge where they land. And that also creates swirling firestorms, which I guess are going to be fire tornadoes to dodge. Apocalypse Roar deals 1.4 million Shadow Flame to all players and pushes them away, and applies a flame that needs to get dispelled. So Mass Dispels and Revival will be huge for this. And this is something you're going to want to use Bloom to reduce the damage of, right? So that it doesn't one-shot your raid. Shadow Flame Breath, again, frontal breath, dodge. Or maybe not frontal, but targeted breath, dodge. Dragon breath, bad. Blaze still exists, so this is players get targeted, run away, and shoot out a wreath in after 4 seconds. Incarnate, again, is drops on the platform, knocks all players up, and does a bunch of physical damage. Burning Scales, again, raid damage over time. And then finally, the tank mechanic here. So it looks like he's going to be in dragon form for this phase. No Fyrakk mechanics here. And instead, he's got his dragon form mechanic, which deals 4 million physical damage and also leaves behind a 40k Shadow Flame dot that stacks. So that is a defensive right there for sure. All right, that is our look at the fights here in Amirdrassil, The Dream's Hope. Stay tuned to this channel, hit subscribe and stuff. Not going to be making videos for the next couple of days, but once I come back, we will have some videos coming out about more 10.2 news. As soon as there's raid testing, I will have videos of at least heroic and mythic testing of all of these bosses as the testing happens. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you found it interesting. I love making these ones. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.